We have a question from one of my OPC board colleagues, Bill Holstein, with considerable reporting experience himself in Japan. He's wondering, among other things, how has Ghosn maintained his wealth through all of this? Do we know how secure is that wealth at this point?
I mean, it's a really good question. Again, another one I wish I knew more about. I mean, frankly, yeah, I think we can make an educated guess that this has obviously hit his net worth hugely, but I don't know more than that.
Well, we do know he's in Lebanon, in a country with severe capital controls right now. That you can get money in, but you can't get it out. And Carlos Ghosn has expenses outside of Lebanon. It's a strange place to be for him right now, because even if he had money, it's not easy to get access to it.
Does the question of how rich he is or will be, is that relevant to the question of venality and all of this? I mean, as I was saying, I as a sort of casual reader, wasn't surprised that he was trying to build his kitty beyond what a Japanese corporate executive would make. But if it extended much beyond that, then I guess my picture of him changes in my mind. So I'm wondering whether you guys see it that same way, or are the dollars we're talking about here not really pertinent to whether he was the guilty party in all of this or not?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I think Carlos Ghosn thought, and he was open and has been open about this, he thought he deserved to be paid like the very, very best in industry, you know, whether it's the CEO of GM or the CEO of Ford, or, you know, Marchioni at the time of when he was CEO of Fiat. And that in France and in Japan, that's not acceptable. But that it's a global marketplace, and he's getting offers from all of these companies to go and manage them. But I don't know. I'm not sure I'm really answering your question, but yeah, I don't know. I don't see that he wanted necessarily to go beyond that, beyond, you know, the kind of, you know, what he felt he was owed for the value he was creating, and the fact that he was in a global marketplace.
Yeah, I'll go one step further. So the genesis of the criminal charges against Carlos Ghosn is that in 2010, when Japan started requiring individual disclosures of salaries, Carlos Ghosn basically cut his pay in half to avoid PR issues, right? So he at least had the awareness that he had been earning a certain amount of money, and he thought that if it became public, it would be a problem, not only in Japan but also in France. So, and Carlos Ghosn was also very public after the disclosures, arguing his case that he deserved the salary he was getting, right? And in fact, talking to people at Nissan, he thought he was worth a whole lot more, and as Nick was saying, is worth as much as anybody else in the business. So I think that much is clear. Now, whether you call that greed, I think is a hard question to answer, right? Because look, we at the Wall Street Journal, we cover CEOs around the world, and the difference between Carlos Ghosn and I think a lot of CEOs is that, you know, you may earn $100 million a year as the head of a publicly held company, but usually what you do is you go to shareholders and you say, I'm worth $100 million a year, you pay me that or I'm going to walk, right? You tell the board that, and you tell shareholders that. That didn't happen in Carlos Ghosn's case, right? That's the difference here. And I don't know if that amounts to a crime. I'm not a lawyer, but that is, I think, is an important difference. And maybe it's a function of the fact that he headed a Japanese and a French company, right? You can't do that, right? Or you don't have that sort of precedent of being a CEO in London or being a CEO in the US. But it is a difference. And it's a difference I think is worth noting, that, you know, if you want to be make a certain amount of money, normally what CEOs do in that case is they go to the board and they go to shareholders and say, this is what I'm worth, and you can either pay me that or I'm going to look for another job. And Carlos Ghosn didn't do that.
Let's return to the corporate side of this for a moment. Nick, you made reference to Fiat-Chrysler. That Fiat-Chrysler, in Ghosn's eyes, I think, was always going to be the grand coup, the coup de grace, bringing about a combination of Fiat-Chrysler with his Nissan Renault empire. As 2019 progressed, and as your story, I believe in June noted, that merger dream is beginning to collapse.
Yeah, I mean, actually, they agreed a deal, amazingly, between Renault and Fiat-Chrysler. But the issue was that they hadn't spoken to Nissan about it, and so Nissan, wasn't best pleased about this deal, made some demands. The French government was worried about Nissan's demands, so the French government wanted to stall. And in the end, this merger fell apart, and it was, I mean, I've rarely seen a merger like this. I mean, it was literally announced, and then Renault and Fiat and their advisors just tried to ram it through. Tried to get Nissan on board, get the French state on board. There was a bunch of board meetings, and then the whole thing blew up in 2 weeks. And then, even though the Renault really wanted it, I think they just couldn't. They could never get their act together to get Fiat-Chrysler back at the table, and Fiat-Chrysler ended up with Renault's longtime French rival Peugeot. But yeah, I think this is something that Ghosn had looked at. Now, I don't think conversations were particularly advanced. I think they mostly took place after Marchionni died. But this was one of the most botched deals that I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it was a disaster, and it just added to the sense of I mean, the companies were in total disarray, and it was also, when you look back at it now, it was probably not a terrible idea for Renault, and in a way they were trying to rebalance the alliance, because Renault was clearly the weaker partner. Now, if Renault suddenly is half of Fiat-Chrysler, then when it starts negotiating with Nissan, it does so from a period of strength. But the way they did it was just, from day one, was very messy and never going to work.
And I think it underlined, in a way, the weakness in the relationship that we mentioned earlier, that the second Carlos Ghosn was out of the picture, they can't have a civilized conversation with one another. I mean, the second that Renault comes to Nissan and says, we want to cut a deal with FCA, are you okay with it? Nissan's reaction is to say, okay, let's start horse trading about what our terms of that agreement are. And the terms are to weaken, sort of Renault's relationship with Nissan even more, right?
Yeah, and frankly, they didn't even say we want to cut a deal with FCA. Are you okay with it? They said, we have cut a deal with FCA. FYI, it's going to be announced in a few hours. I mean, I remember learning. We wrote about that deal. I think it was on the Saturday. Deal was announced on the Monday. So a couple of days before, and I was ringing up sources, I'm sure Sean, you were too, at Nissan, being like, that Renault and FCA are going to working towards a merger on Monday, and they couldn't believe it. They were dumbfounded. They thought we must be mistaken. So that just shows that they were literally told at the very, very, very last minute about this plan.